What's going on, everybody? We are live for Liam's first look at UFC Vegas 75. Marvin Vettori versus Jared, the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. We have got a middleweight main event, but we've got a lightweight centered card overall. I said on Twitter today, it reminds me of old WEC. We've got a bunch of fights in the flyweight division, in the bantamweight division, in the lightweight division, in the featherweight division, and these are a lot of action oriented divisions for the UFC. So top heavy, it's a little bit of the heavier action on the card. But then at the bottom of this card, we're going to be dealing with a lot of the lighter weight fighters, a little bit faster pace, a little bit more explosive, a little bit higher skilled on average. So a lot of fun fights to break down overall. And I have two waters with me tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got 14 fights to break down. So a lot of talking to be done. And with that being said, on Liam's first look, I always start with the main event. You know, if you guys watch my Thursday panel show, we start from the bottom of the card and work our way up with full research. But on today's show, I'm going to be giving you guys some of my first look. I've done a lot of preliminary research, but I haven't gone back and done as deep a tape study as I will do before I place my final wagers for this card. But let's talk about it broadly speaking, right? Because we've got a pretty closely lined fight here. I'm going to bring up the current odds for these fights. But when I was looking earlier today, Marvin Vettori was still available plus 100 on Caesars Sportsbook, and he is 10 years younger than his opponent here in Jared Cannonier. That's just uncommon, very rare to see something like that in a UFC main event. But Jared Cannonier is an uncommon guy, comes into the UFC a little bit later on in life, comes in as a heavyweight, as a matter of fact, has some mixed results, comes down to light heavyweight, has some mixed results, and eventually finds his way to the middleweight division where his only losses have been to the current champion, Israel Adesanya, and former champion Robert Whitaker, both in, the Izzy fight wasn't really competitive, all things considered. It was just a terrible fight in which nothing really happened. But the Robert Whitaker fight was a very competitive fight. So Cannonier's proved to be, a good fighter, but even in some of his wins, he hasn't separated himself necessarily, had a close fight, but a decisive fight against Kelvin Gastelum. And then he also had a close fight against Sean Strickland in December. So, he's a guy who's not getting any younger, going to be coming in here 39 years of age. But Marvin Vettori, his plus level attributes are mostly the fact that he gets hit well. It's like when you talk about what he does well, he applies some pace. He's a tough guy. He's got some stick to itiveness. He's gone the distance with tough guys and outlasted them a little bit. But, his plus level skills aren't necessarily offensive at all times. And especially when you see something like the Adesanya performances, and he's had multiple cracks, he's just not a guy that pursues offense with the rigor that you want. I remember betting on him before the Adesanya 2 fight because he's like, by any means necessary, Italy's going to get another champion. I'm like, all right, you sold me with the rhetoric. You sold me with the improvements. The fight was close the first time, and he didn't really attempt, a single interesting takedown. He didn't move off of a skill that wasn't working. He applied the same craft over and over. His back take was absolutely sloppy and forced. He had a great position and he just gave it up by just getting so tense and awkward. And I felt like, just consolidating top position could have made such a difference there. So a lot of flaws that we've seen with Marvin Vettori, but here's the positives. He's still only 29 years of age. He's working in the US. He's getting a lot of good training rounds in. He's a very tough guy. You know that you're going to get pretty solid work ethic. But if somebody was going to crack a granite chin, I mean, you might call somebody like Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. He carries a tremendous amount of power. He's been getting knockouts in the heavyweight division, the light heavyweight division, and the middleweight division. So he's clearly got skills. Sometimes his offense can be a little bit muted, but is this the kind of opponent that's going to take his big offense away from him? Let's bring up UFC stats here just for perspective. But I think stats are sometimes overanalyzed and certainly not everything, but let's just use it for context here. Marvin Vettori, over a fairly large UFC sample size, is absorbing 3.65 strikes per minute. And, 3.65 strikes from Jared Cannonier are just different than a lot of guys in this division. He throws insane calf kicks. He throws brutal head kicks. And when he's on, he's really tough because he's really difficult to get to. He's a pretty strong guy. I think that, kind of my contrarian brain always goes to, looking at this plus money under 4.5 rounds, because you got middleweights here. Everybody's, thought is going to be Marvin's just so durable, which I get. But how long is that going to last? He's now 29 years of age. He's taken a ton of beatings in the UFC. He's taken a ton of damage in the UFC. So at any point, could the chin go? Absolutely. Jared Cannonier, perfect candidate to do something like that. Also, he doesn't have to do it to the chin. He can just take you out at the legs. He hits like a truck, and he's a very hard-bodied individual. So it's a tricky fight to me. I understand why this is a pick. I'm curious to see what this opened up at as well. So yeah, plus 100, still the best available price according to Best Fight Odds. That's on Caesars Sportsbook. And you're looking at a broadly speaking pick'em fight here. Some books even have Marvin Vettori favored. You're looking at FanDuel running a minus 120 on Vettori, minus 106, is the comeback on the Killer Gorilla Jared Cannonier. And the best available price is that price on FanDuel. So if you're looking to deal Jared here, you're getting minus 106. You're basically getting a plus 100 comeback. If you shop books here, you could get a synthetic hold that's very small in this fight. So it's basically take your pick, and I do find it curious that they're offering this kind of very close price on a huge age gap. I feel like the average MMA bettor is going to look at that huge age gap, and it's going to be hard to ignore, and I think that also Marvin has a pretty solid body of work alongside that. But it's just a tricky fight for me, man. I don't feel bullish on Marvin. I felt like I haven't been inspired by his recent performances, to tell you the truth. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewatch a couple Marvin fights, give him another chance, see if there's something I'm missing from these other fights. But I just haven't liked what I've seen in his recent performances. Certainly not enough to back him here at a chalk situation. And Jared Cannonier is just a really hard guy to bet against at the slight chalk price. I tried to do it with Sean Strickland, who I think is probably a little bit more sound in all positions than Marvin. It didn't happen. So, that to me was a little bit foretelling as well. Jared Cannonier can still go out there and win decisions over 5 rounds against these guys. And I thought it was a close fight. I thought it could have went his way, but at the end of the day, he just lands really heavy shots that impact the judges. And I don't think Marvin, even a guy who's so durable and has good stick-to-itiveness, he's not above showing it a little bit with his head when he's getting hit. And I think that's the kind of fight that could go against him. But, Jared's not a guy who's reliable to go out there and throw volume either. I'm not thrilled to go lay minus 106 on Jared Cannonier, because then he turns in the Adesanya performance where I bet on him against Adesanya. I'm like, this guy's got plus level knockout ability, and he's not going to be afraid to fight this guy. Oh, boy, was I wrong. He just went out there and laid an egg, I felt like, tried to push him against the fence. It was a disgusting fight. So I think he's a good fighter, but I can't really justify betting on him either. So for me, my first initial gut lean here was just the under 4.5 as a contrarian kind of play, because I think Jared Cannonier at 39 years of age, I mean, eventually it's going to go. He's built different. He's a very strong guy, very athletic for his age, of course, but he also has been knocked out before. He's been hurt really badly before at middleweight. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. I even thought Derek Brunson, my guy, was doing some work, and I bet Jared Cannonier hugely in that spot. Broke my heart, but I just had a feeling Jared stays so strong throughout the fight, and he came back in a big way on Brunson. And dude, he's a guy that's got real power, and his ground and pound is disgusting as well as he's gotten further along in his career. So I just don't want to sleep on Jared again at this pick'em price and end up looking the fool. So probably going to end up passing on that main event. Next up, guys, we've got a very interesting fight in the 155-pound division. A little bit of a squash match here, according to the odds makers. You got a minus 910 best available price on Arman Tsarukyan. And it's a little bit of stay busy work here against Joaquim Silva, but Joaquim Silva is no joke. The problem for him here is that I think Armen has the skills to dictate where this fight takes place. I think he's probably got an ability to keep slightly better pace on the feet. And I also think he just has more ability to win this fight by knockout. I think he's a little bit more durable than Silva at this point in his career, but Silva is still a dangerous guy, went out there up a weight class against Neil Magny and absolutely sunned him with that guillotine series. And that was exactly what told me that Shavkat Lakhmanov was just that against Neil Magny, and that the sub prop had to be hammered because Joaquim Silva is a 155 pounder. right? And he just easily worked Magny on the ground. And this is where the Magny as a fish moniker came from. And it's no disrespect to the legend Neil Magny, who's won so many fights, but just as a pure grappler, a little bit of a fish, and he still continues to work on it, and he's getting better. But he whooped my ass, that's for sure. But just at the UFC level. Now, as far as Rick Glenn, excuse me, goes, that was a concerning performance because Rick Glenn is not traditionally the biggest knockout puncher, certainly not early on in the fight. And he just absolutely blasted him out of there. So I think that that's a little bit foretelling here. Arman Tsarukyan, so hungry, so dangerous, a lot of power on the feet, a lot of spinning attacks. He can work people over with the ground and pound as well. Should have the grappling to probably neutralize Netto in some of these exchanges, but Netto is a scary guy on the mat. So I think the best chance for Arman is just to catch him on the feet and work him with some shots. And I think he can do that. So I think the speed advantage will be big here. I think, again, we're probably dealing with a pretty significant age gap here. Yes, absolutely. About 8 years here for Arman Tsarukyan and Joaquim Silva. So I think this is a fun fight. I think it's going to be fun while it lasts, but I think that, this is a fight for Arman to take another step forward, in his career. He's still a young guy, but he's had a lot of really positive results. And you look at his UFC body of work, Demiris Magulov, extremely impressive win. Mateusz Gamrot, really questionable loss. But I think it's a fair fight to score for Gamrot. But again, it's like a fight that could have easily went his way. And we're talking about a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fight win streak that he'd be on in the UFC since fighting Islam Makhachev to a competitive decision in a UFC debut on short notice. So the kid has just been coming up aces throughout. I think he's a very impressive candidate in this lightweight division. I think he's a guy that should be fighting up, up, up. And I think this is another showcase spot, another opportunity to potentially build out that highlight reel, keep him fresh, keep him in the cage, and I think remind people exactly who Arman Tsarukyan is. And I remember before, a couple of these fights, people were telling me like, this guy's the live underdog against Arman and this guy. And I remember I sat out the Arman fight against Gamrot. I was just too unsure there. I felt like they were both elite guys, but basically you give me anybody who hasn't proven they're an elite lightweight or like close to it, fighting in that top 10 in the division. And I'm basically taking Arman to steamroll him most of the time. I just think he's that good. So I think this is another example of him coming in and steamrolling somebody that's very talented. Because I think he's just younger, fresher, hungrier, wants it badder, and he's also dangerous in every position. Excellent wrestling, world class, I would say, by UFC standards, certainly. Competed in every position with Makhachev. So just a really fun prospect to watch. Shout out to all the people in the chat, guys. We got a lot of great people rocking with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. My guy YBB was on the show last week. Late Night Liam absolutely killed it on the show, brother. Appreciate your appearance. Absolutely killed it. And just a lot of great names in here. A lot of friends of the show, a lot of former guests, and also a lot of great regular viewers of the show. So I appreciate each and every one of your contributions. And with that being said, let's kick it over to the next fight here, because we got a lot to talk about. We got Christian Leeroy Duncan taking on Armen Petrosyan. And I was pretty big on Duncan against Dusko Todorovic, right? I felt like Dusko Todorovic, was just in a really tough spot in his career. He had been getting hammered on a little bit, and, his confidence was really shaken up. So you give him this guy who's streaking, coming in with a ton of confidence, very talented, right? It just was a recipe for disaster. I felt like kind of a sketchy looking ending there, just a weird fight overall. So he didn't really get that pizzazz kickoff to his career that he wanted. And I got to do some more tape study and due diligence here, because CLD is the much younger fighter here, 5 years younger, 27 against a 32-year-old. And he's got an 8-inch reach advantage, according to Tapology. That sounds hard to believe. But Armen Petrosyan, he kind of got a little bit lucky, and I was on him when he beat what's his name? Or am I thinking of the wrong guy here? No, I'm not. Gregory Rodriguez. I couldn't see his name on there, and for some reason I was looking for RoboCop. But what we're talking about here is the fact that he kind of got a very close split decision to go his way, but then he fought very competitively with Caio Barajo, and we've seen just how dangerous Caio Barajo has been in recent performances. High level grappling, and he fought a very calculated fight there. A lot of the MMA meta looking for body triangles in certain positions. But then again, against AJ Dobson, plus level athlete, maybe a little bit green on some of the MMA skills still coming along in those areas because he's got a lot of quick finishes, hasn't gotten a lot of cage time because he's a really dangerous fighter out of Ohio. So shout out to those guys. And he does a lot of good physical training, but just felt like he was a little bit, out savvied there, outskilled by a guy who's been around the Muay Thai scene for longer. So I think that, this should be probably a pretty honest fight on the feet. I have to see if CLD has some grappling in his back pocket. But I feel like, what I've seen from him is primarily striking, if my memory serves. So, I think it could be an honest fight on the feet. And I saw Arman was like a, pretty sizable underdog here, plus 150 and up. And, I'm not sure. I feel like it's a closer fight than that. But that reach advantage sounds pretty significant. So going to do a little bit deeper digging. Certainly not something I'm rushing to play. I'm sure there's going to be some more love that comes in that way because he's on a good run. And Arman, again, he's got that kind of fraudulent win against Hobocop that a lot of people thought went against him. So I think that could, push the line further against him. So not in a rush to play it. Normally, when you're looking to play underdogs, you're looking to play him later on. So for me, I'm gonna wait and let that line marinate a little bit. Next up, we've got a 145-pound fight. And now we start working our way back, down in weight. We got one more welterweight contest, but everything else on the card is 155 and below. So we've dealt with some of the more volatile, heavier weight contests, but now we got Pat Sabatini versus Lucas Almeida. And speaking of volatile, my notes on Pat Sabatini are all about him being an extremely impressive grappler. He does a lot of things right. He's a very dangerous guy. Normally makes the right choice on the ground, the next right choice, and it puts him in a position to win. But he's also been getting hurt on the feet. It's been alarming because Lucas Almeida hits like a truck when he's given the chance to land flush on the chin. And, I never would have, if you gave me 10 guesses, I wouldn't have guessed Damon Jackson by first round knockout. That's not how I saw that fight playing out. I thought Pat was going to have a very winnable fight there against Damon. And instead, he got audited pretty quick there. It was a tough fight. And, let's just say he got caught. But if we give him the benefit of the doubt, he got caught there. He got badly hurt by Jamal Emmers. And if Jamal Emmers didn't go for that toe hold, we could be having a whole different conversation, as well, because it gave Pat just, a free heel hook. He's a very high level grappler. And, he's willing to be in a toe hold, which is mostly about discomfort, because a heel hook will do real damage, and it put Jamal Emmers out for a while. So, that's probably one that Jamal wishes he had back. And I think that for Pat, he got badly hurt in that fight. He fought TJ Laramie, undersized. Tucker Lutz hasn't panned out yet in the UFC. Wishing him the best, but a couple tough outings to start. Tristan Connolly, guy that's no longer with the promotion as far as my memory serves, and really never looked physically his best, I felt like, in the UFC. Tough guy though, always came to fight. Has a crazy win on his resume over a ranked welterweight in Michelle Pereira. So, he's a legend for that reason. But then, wins over Jesse Stern, Jordan Titoni. It doesn't really tell you as much. And he does have that arm injury loss. And it was basically a submission, as far as I'm concerned, and I think most grapplers would kind of agree there. So it's tough. His resume's got some question marks, in it. And, you're looking at him at a minus 180 favorite here, coming off a first round knockout loss. We've seen that end up, sideways in the past many times. And I won't be laying that, I don't think. But it also could be recency bias for me. I'm going to investigate this one a little bit further. But just my gut instinct is that somebody like Lucas Almeida, let's look at his record. He's got one loss on his record to Daniel Zellhuber. Daniel Zellhuber, looked tough, looked very good in his most recent fight. Looked very bad the outing before that, but it was his UFC debut. You kind of give him a break. So Almeida, got beat on the Contender Series, unanimous decision, goes out and gets another finish win, and then the knockout over Mike Trezano. He's had a couple bouts fall through. To Hugov, botched weight cut. Andre Fili, eye injury. Dawoodu withdrew from the fight. So nobody wants to fight this guy after he knocked out Mike Trezano, who, again, is a very tough guy. He's a local. So shout out to Mike Trezano and the guys over at Tiger Schulman's. But when you're looking at, how that fight progressed, it was a competitive back and forth fight, but Almeida stayed tough, stayed in it with a guy who's UFC tested, who's been there, who's been in some of these 15-minute fights, and he put him out of there in round 3, man. He kept hurting him throughout that fight. And when he got hurt, he stayed in it. So he's just, to me, a very tough guy to put away on the feet. And I want to see, way more of a suspect ground game. I got to go back and look at his work on the ground, but I just feel like if he's got anything to work with on the ground, and he's got a lot of wins by sub just from scanning his record regionally, against some guys that have decent records on paper. So, I'm not going to count this guy out here too early, but I do think Pat Sabatini's a real talent. I'm just a little bit concerned about the chin. And again, just some of the things that we've seen, the injuries, and it doesn't seem like guys want to fight Lucas Almeida right now in the UFC. So I take note of something like that. And again, Pat's a good fighter, very good, highly skilled from a great team. All those things are true. But the one thing that I look at as a real potential red flag is just, are people overrating this win streak of, prior to the Damon Jackson fight, of TJ Laramie, Tucker Lutz, Jamal Emmers, and Tristan Connolly? I'm just asking. I'm just asking questions. I haven't bet the fight yet, but I think that I understand why people would be coming in a little bit on this underdog shot on Almeida at the current price. Next up, we have Nikolas Motta taking on Manuel Torres. And, investigating my research on Manuel Torres was a little bit alarming, because I do have in my notes, let me pull it up. I have really detailed fighter notes on a lot of fighters that fight in the UFC. And Manuel Torres, I don't have very detailed notes, but I took some notes before he fought on Contender Series. And this is what I have on his fight against Mahatma Garcia Avalos in Club Hardcore 3 on 11/3/2018 at 145 pounds, Quinta Roo, Cancun, Mexico, in the main event. I said Loco's punching early, right into the clinch, gets elevated on his single leg, used the guillotine in the fence to get back up and threaten his own subs, ends up on top in a scramble. Opponent rolls through for a leg entanglement. He tried to posture and punch. Then he looked for a straight ankle lock, and ended up getting heel hooked instead. Garcia Avalos defeats Manuel Loco Torres via sub-1 heel hook at 59 seconds of the very first round. That fight in 2018, that's a long time ago, 5 years. Could have gotten a lot better. But what that showed me was, at 8-0, he lost to an 8-7-1 fighter who was, a little bit of a journeyman. And he lost via submission in the very first round. If that was a isolated incident, I think we could write it off as, a little bit flukish or maybe just something to forget about. But then the same thing happens in 2019. Carlos Calvo, admittedly a undefeated 6-0 prospect at the time. He is now 7-3 for whatever it's worth on a 3-loss streak. And I think that, he's from VFS Academy, so very good school. He's probably fighting very tough fighters, so I don't want to take anything away from him. He's 24, could be getting better. But again, hasn't been on the hottest streak since submitting Manuel Torres with the knee bar in the first round. Then we look at the win streak. Daniel Vega, rear naked choke in Combate over a 12-2 fighter. So that's kind of impressive. I don't know Daniel Vega. He's now 12-8-1. So that was probably a little bit of a fraudulent 12-2. But either way, we wish him the best. He beat Carlos Enrique Canada. And I have this one in my notes as well. Carlos Enrique Canada. Excuse me. Not to be disrespectful. I didn't see the Enye. But Carlos Enrique Cañada. It almost sounds like can. It's a little bit disrespectful, but it almost sounds like can. 10-11-0. This guy was submitted via guillotine choke in 25 seconds. And I was talking about just Loco. I thought he looked impressive, well-muscled, low body fat percentage. I said kind of slow feet. Good hard 1-2 from Torres. Torres put himself in the clinch, but locked a very tight guillotine on a standing entry. So again, didn't create the separation necessarily that you wanted to see from him, but he was able to submit a journeyman fighter. Then he goes out there and finishes 9-3 Colton England on the Contender Series, and I backed him in that spot, I believe. I think I ended up hitting the knockout prop, but I'd have to go back and check. In any case, in fact, let me go back and check. I don't want to mistake it. I feel like actually maybe I bet him against Camacho. Either way, I ended up betting him against one of his opponents in the UFC because he's been fighting a pretty low level of guys. You know, Colton England, a guy that hasn't made it yet on the UFC level. His recent run, he's 13-4, but he's on a 4-fight win streak. So some credit to be deserved there. In fact, he's on a 4-fight win streak since losing to Manuel Torres via knockout in the first round. But he does show 1, 2, 3 other first round knockout losses on his resume. 4, 5 if you consider his amateur fights as well. So basically, the way to beat Colton England is via strikes. But otherwise, you know, he can implement some grappling and have some success and maybe have some strikes of his own, but maybe a better hammer than a nail, let's say, so far in his career. Frank Camacho, you know, he's a guy who's, again, a fun action fighter, but been on the wrong end of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 8 fights, guys. So, you know, he's just been on a rough run. Let's look at how old our guy, Frank the Tank, is. 34 years of age. So a little bit older for this lightweight division, perhaps, and also just had a bevy of wars, 22-9, a little bit older in fight years. So Camacho, fun fighter, action fighter, but struggling at the UFC level. I think that's fair to say at 170 and at 155. So now he's taking on Nikolas Motta. And let's give some context to the Motta resume. We've got 30-year-old Nikolas Motta here from Extreme Couture, very good gym, won some fights in CFFC, one of the best regional promotions in the world. You know, and, you know, shout out to the Beast Coast, East Coast, baby, putting out some real prospects coming into the UFC. But he also is a guy that struggled in terms of that durability. And I think when you look at the UFC, they've got a certain way of putting together these matchups where, you know, Motta, he doesn't tend to be a guy who wants to put it on the ground always. He wants to, you know, find his shots on the feet, pick his range. You know, he's a dangerous fighter. And I think that when you look at what Motta does well, he's a good boxer. He moves his head, you know, he does some stuff, but his defense is still a work in progress. And I do think that Manuel Torres could certainly win this fight by knockout. You know, he's a dangerous puncher. He's a long guy. He seems like he's on all the good supplements. He's a very athletic fighter as is. He came in from the regional scene looking very athletic, but, you know, he also just looks insanely muscled out. Looks like he puts in a lot of work, a lot of effort in the gym, and looks like he's fully focused and all in. You know, let's look at some of the intangibles here in terms of how these two match up. He's going to have a 2.5-inch reach advantage on the Torres side, and he's also going to be 1 inch taller, 2 years younger here. So some slight anthropomorphic advantages for the Torres side here, but he also you know, has probably just a touch more of the natural power and a little bit better durability on paper. I think Motta would be smart to try and take this to the ground. I have to look into his ground game a little bit more, but just knowing what I know about what we've seen from Torres, his ground game so far, he's got a very good guillotine. He's got good offensive jiu-jitsu, but oftentimes that's to mask, you know, getting into extended exchanges. And I think that, you know, somebody, you know, if they could extend him into deeper exchanges in jiu-jitsu, they could still potentially find some of those holes. But in the first layer of takedown defense and also in his attacking offensive fundamental jiu-jitsu, I think, you know, Torres is probably going to have some good skills. I just think that as it gets extended, as it gets deeper into exchanges, he would potentially struggle with some of those. So shout out to our guy, Matt R. With the dono. Appreciate you, brother. I always read. If you guys have a question, comment, concern, if you have a dono, never asked for, but always greatly appreciated, my man. Thank you so much. He said, Liam, glad you split from Rich. Disrespectful in the way he talks about fighters. Also not third-party tracked. He actually is third-party tracked, my man. I will give him that credit. You could find his Bet MMA out there. But, he also has just a different philosophy, a different way of being. We debated calling it the Face and the Heel podcast and things like that. He has a different attitude and way of being, and that's fine. There's many different ways to approach life, but I'm going to do it my way on my show. He didn't want to be on the show anymore, so it's fine. I wish him the best, but I'm going to continue doing the show. I'm enjoying doing the show, and I appreciate everybody that sticks around and rocks with it. And we had, if you guys go back, you guys can look, as Chael Sun, it says publicly audited numbers. I did higher numbers on panels I've done in the past than I've done on shows that we did together. So we did an experiment together. We had good success, but also I've had plenty of success on my own in the past. It's all good. And I wish everybody the best. So God bless. And I appreciate my guy, Don't Tap Podcast. There's 38 watching, 16 likes. Guys, if you could drop a like on the video, I would truly appreciate it. Does a great thing to help this channel, supports your guy a little bit. Always happy to break down these fights. But it doesn't hurt if you guys show a little extra love. So I appreciate you guys. And thank you so much to our guy, Matt R. I think that, it's truly an act of kindness. So I appreciate you, my brother. And, even the kind words. My guy Ryan says, appreciate the work you put in every week. It's my pleasure. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. And I'm always going to be here. You guys can look back. I've been doing this week in and week out for a lot of damn weeks, and I'm not going to stop anytime soon. I love doing this. So right back to it for me each and every time. The next fight that we've got to talk about, folks, is Muslim Salikhov and Nikolas Dalby at 170 pounds. Boy, oh boy. This is a fun fight to discuss because on the one hand, Nikolas Dalby, he's been a little bit tricky as an underdog, I have a couple documents that I put together on a weekly basis, and I'm going to pull one of them up right now, which is just the performance and odds range for UFC Vegas 75 fighters. And Muslim Salikhov, guys, is 5-2 as a UFC favorite. I mean, the guy is just freaking money. And one of the times that he lost as a favorite is one of my, I think I've only had 6 or 7 max bets, like 10 units, just like all in kind of play for me, just a huge bet by my standards. I rarely do it. And I did the leech against Muslim Salikhov because he had every box that I wanted to check, just like every single thing. Like I felt like the UFC wanted him to win. I felt like the fans wanted him to win. I felt like he wanted to win really bad. I felt like he was a hungrier fighter. I felt like he was the bigger fighter. I felt like he hit harder. I felt like he was a faster guy. I felt like he was more durable. I felt like he wanted it more. Every box was checked for the leech. So I bet the leech hugely as a big or as a medium size, a small plus 150, I think it was underdog there against Muslim Salikhov. One of my favorite bets of all time. But Muslim Salikhov, guys, as a favorite prince. That's why he's been a favorite in so many UFC fights. And when he's been a dog, it's been a little bit of 1-0, right? So like they got burnt when they made him a dog. They're like, nah, back to a favorite. So this is a guy who I think is probably just a better fighter than Nikolas Dalby. But Dalby finds a way to grease these fights. I mean, I didn't think he beat Daniel Rodriguez at all, but he was a plus 250 dog. And I'll tell you, they didn't give me my money on Daniel Rodriguez. They just didn't give it to me. So I felt like this was the kind of fight that stood out to me as, whoa, let's look for a potential sneaky under here. I feel like both these guys could potentially fall apart. Dalby brings pressure. I feel like that could make Muslim Salikhov at this age, at this stage of the game, potentially fall apart a little bit down the stretch. But I also think that he could easily walk himself onto a huge shot and get knocked the hell out. Muslim Salikhov is a dangerous power hitter, and he normally can point fight and do his little thing. But Dalby, I feel like, is able to get hurt to the body. I feel like sometimes he just walks onto big shots and gets cut badly on the head. I just can't rely on these guys. Let me look at the line here, see exactly what we're dealing with. Oh boy, I can't find this line. Do they not have it on here? Best Fight Odds is the absolute worst website, man. Here it is. It's listed under UFC Fight Night 228, June 24th, because Best Fight Odds sucks the horn. Nikolas Dalby is a plus 140 underdog in some of the sharper markets. Looks like some of the square markets, maybe a plus 170, plus 160. So pretty balanced fight, though. Minus 180 to minus 200, it seems like. Pretty tight market with, all things considered. For me, I'm not laying minus 200 on Muslim Salikhov. He's 39 years of age, but he's fighting a 38-year-old. I don't think either one of these guys are supreme pickings, but I do think I'm curious what this under is priced at. Of course, it is not listed on Best Fight Odds, so I'll be curious. I think sharp money was probably on Dalby early for sure. It's just too wide of a line for a volatile fight in a weight class like 170 where anybody could get slept. Just at one, you guys got to think like, when we're dealing with 35, 45, some guys have power, not everybody. So you can kind of cap that in a little bit, but like, it doesn't matter if I have great power or not. It's 170 pounds. It's 200 pounds. If I hit you with my shin in the face, it's like you could just go to sleep. Charles Oliveira the other night, I mean, bravo. A couple shins to the face and Beneil Dariush was reduced. So it was a great showing. And I even want to do some kind of reaction to that pay-per-view because just some of the things on that show blew my mind. And Charles Oliveira continues to win world titles with knees to the body. It's like this guy just, he keeps it very offensive at all times. A good defense is a good offense, and he just kept on the offense, whether it was on the ground or on the feet. So he really blew me away this weekend. But back to this fight, I just thought, this doesn't really scream minus 200 favorite to me. Seems like a little bit of a closer line fight, but I do agree. Muslim Salikhov probably got to be minus 150 here, or maybe a little bit shorter. But like, I just think he's got to be favored in this fight because he's better. I just think he's a better fighter. Been fighting at a little bit of a higher level, but he's also starting to show his age. I think a little bit in these fights. Certainly, I thought that was the case in the Leach fight. I thought he was just clearly slower than him. But Dalby again is 38. He's had problems outside the octagon. He's been cut from the organization before. So, yeah, my gut instinct here is that Salikhov probably decapitates him at some point. Next up, we've got the preliminary headliner, and I kind of have an opinion on this one already. I'm going to just go through the chat real quick because we've had so many sharp people commenting. My guy Matt R says he took Torres sub plus 500 or 600. Good stuff. Torres, he's got those dangerous guillotines, man. I certainly won't discount that. I think his club and sub game is strong. Shout out to Don't Tap Podcast, says, do your thing, Liam, one of the top guys in the space. Thank you for your work. I appreciate that. It's always my pleasure. Hype for another breakdown, Liam. Let's do it, my man. We got the prelims to go, and we've got Thursday. Already one great guest lined up. Excited to announce that soon, and hopefully we'll get one more guest on the show as well. Got another couple guests lined up for future shows as well. Guests that you haven't seen, returning friends of the show. We got all sorts of great stuff, and we're just getting started. So if you haven't already, get that subscribe button going, get that like button going, show love, and appreciate each and every one of you guys. Winner fights Mike Malott. I love that from Don't Tap. I think that's a good way to boost that highlight. If you guys don't believe it, go back and watch from last week. Everything's timestamped, but go back to that Mike Malott prediction where I said Mike Malott is going to submit this man with a guillotine choke. I told you why. I went back to the exact fight tape. A lot of people say they watch tape. A lot of people say they have research. A lot of people say they have notes, but then I have exact receipts on a lot of fights, and it's happened over and over and over again. I said it was going to be a guillotine choke. So go back and check the receipts on that. I didn't even bet it because I'm stupid and I didn't check, but a few people in the Lab VIP sent me their tickets of the guillotine choke plus 800 on BetMGM, exact submission. And I said, the only way I've bet this fight is the exact sub at crazy odds on the sub for the guillotine choke. So Mike Malott continues to be a guillotine assassin. It takes one to know one. I'm trying to mold myself into one every day. I study great guillotines. I know he has a great one. So shout out to Mike Malott. I've said, I think in some positions, Fugit could have given him trouble, but those are the positions where if he gets hurt, his club and sub game is nasty, man. And when he came out of Team Alpha Male, dude, Team Alpha Male is known for that guillotine. That guillotine is disgusting. The way they transition from one to the next, they've got a lot of ways to finish it. And a good guillotine is just a path to another good guillotine. That's all it is. You want to get out of this one? No problem. Let's get to the next one. Let's get to one that's even deeper. That's it. That's how a guillotine should work. And if not, I'm on top. There's a guy, Karev Silver Fox. Study him. Karel Silver Fox Provic, I think his name is. He coaches Aaron Blanchfield. He coaches some of the highest level people in the world. He's done work with Faraz Sahabi and George St. Pierre. He's done work with John Danaher and all the best guys. He's learned from all the best guys. His guillotine series is revolutionary in my view. A lot of the best people in MMA use it. And, when you get stuck in guillotines on bottom, that's when the guillotine becomes a less effective maneuver. When you use it as an offensive attacking position to stay on top and stay in advantageous positions, it's just a fantastic hold. And I think, things that you will continue to see in the MMA meta, the body triangle and the guillotine choke, because they're extremely effective. They work just so well. So I think, it's a cycle always in grappling arts of, people get really good at attacking and people start to get much better at defending the chokes or the attacks. So, the leg lock defense has improved exponentially. Why? Because people were getting their stuff, torn apart. So I think it's always a constant evolution of offense and defense. And I think guillotine offense right now, is surpassing a lot of fighters' level of guillotine defense. Let's say that. It's the reason why Jack Hermanson almost made a career of a guillotine he learned at a John Danaher seminar. I mean, seriously, go back and look, and he's submitting black belts. So jiu-jitsu is constantly evolving. That's the point to take away from this conversation. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. A lot of really sharp banter in the chat. We got 49 people rocking with us live. We get to debate whether or not Dalby is a cardio case for the whole week. Yeah, man. I mean, he kind of comes and goes like the wind with that cardio, right? I think he's been showing up motivated for his last couple fights, but it's kind of just a little bit hit and miss with him at times. So wish him the best. Cashville Rican says, appreciate the work you always put in, brother. It's my pleasure, my man. I appreciate you being here. Everybody that drops a like on this video, I appreciate you. If you ever subscribe to this channel, I appreciate you. If you drop comments, I appreciate you. If you act in the live chat, I freaking appreciate you. So everybody that's here, thank you for your support. Next up, Howney, Barcelos, Miles Johns were in it. Howney is probably going to be a little bit slept on this week would be my initial impression. The reason I'd feel that way is just, he got knocked out in his last fight. He's a little bit of an older fighter, 7 years older here, in fact. And he's minus 225 in this spot. You're looking at a couple fights ago, he's minus 400 against Victor Henry. I think Victor Henry would beat Miles Johns, honestly. So, it's kind of it's tricky though, because everybody's skills match up differently. Miles Johns can wrestle, so maybe Victor Henry would be a tough matchup, but I think Victor Henry could come on really strong and beat Miles Johns down the stretch and just out cardio him, land a lot of shots. So I think that, the loss to Mario Bautista, I could forgive that. The loss to John Castaneda, I could forgive that, but I thought the Adrian Yanez fight was close. I thought that was a very close fight. Going to split decision with Cole Smith, that's not inspiring to me, my man. That was a really sketchy fight. I felt like Cole Smith, a tough kid, worked hard, tried to be here, but I don't think he was at the level. 7-3 now on the regional scene on a 3-fight losing streak. Lost to Miles John by split. Lost to Hunter Azure, good fighter, by unanimous. Lost to John Sweeney by split at XMMA Black Magic in April last year. He has not been seen since, so wish him the best. But our guy Cole Smith, a little bit in that rebuilding process, or maybe move into something else. Kevin Natividad, I've harped on this before. If you've listened to my content, the reason I don't really vibe with Miles Johns, he's clearly holding the glove of Kevin Natividad, blasted him with an uppercut, potentially changed his life and career. So I just didn't love to see that. It was a vicious knockout, and he was already whooping on Kevin a little bit, but just pretty unnecessary. Clear foul. I thought it should have been overturned to a DQ as well. Then he beats Anderson Dos Santos, clear journeyman type of fighter, 21-8. now 24-10, 37 years of age, 1-3 in the UFC. Only win in the UFC was a guillotine choke over Martin Day, who I think was 1-4 in the UFC, or 0-5 in the UFC, if my memory serves. So, just not a beautiful, stellar resume that's really blowing you away. It's good on paper. The win over Adrian Yanez, certainly aging like fine wine. Win over Levi Moles, good win, no doubt about it. But those were unanimous decision and split decision. Even the Kyle Machado win, nothing to take away from that. But just since he's got to the UFC, even the Vince Morales win, how inspiring is that? Vince Morales, 12-7 overall, 3-5 in the UFC. His last win was over Teruto Ishihara at XMMA Bash at the Beach. So again, a guy who's trying to work his way back to the UFC, not UFC level at this point. So I think Raoni Barcelos, skill for skill, is better than Miles Johns at everything. I really believe that. So the question is like, how washed is Raoni Barcelos? And I don't think he's that washed. I thought he was fighting very well against Umar, but I also thought that Umar was clearly the side against Raoni because he was the much younger fighter. Ask who the UFC wants to win. They never wanted Raoni to win. There's a reason they didn't promote him up the damn card. I don't think now they care if he wins or loses, right? He's not on the big streak anymore, and people can't say he deserves a title shot and this and that. He's a little bit older. He didn't speak great English. They didn't want to promote him for a title shot. I mean, let's just call the business what it is. They saw he's really skilled. Let's wait him out. Let's see until he gets old, and then we'll give him the hardest guys. So that's like, yeah, like that's a recipe to lose. They tried to give him Victor Henry, a guy who was extremely experienced from Japan, and nobody knew who he was. And like now it's like, oh, he's a bum. He stinks. I bet Victor Henry there, plus 425. One of my favorite bets again of all time. 1 unit on Victor Henry, plus 425. Victor Henry is a guy that will fight for your damn money. Is he a guy that you should lay minus 400 against the Suns out? No, but is he a guy? And I thought that was an underperformance from him as well. I didn't think he looked like himself at all. But I think that, this is the kind of thing where Raoni Barcelos, I feel like, might remind people what time it is, because I think Miles Johns might be a touch, I don't want to say fraudulent, but I just think, when he meets like real resistance from an experienced fighter, I think he may fall apart. And I think that that's what he's going to get. I think Raoni Barcelos is a guy that doesn't need to fight to prove much. And I think he's going to come out here and fight to prove a lot, because that last fight, people are talking, man. People are talking about he's done. He's washed. His chin's gone. And we'll see. I think Umar is a scary guy to fight. I don't know that anybody wants to fight him in the bantamweight division right now. I'm sure a lot of people's phone is on silent. I think a lot of people are on vacation, right? I think a lot of people, when Umar Nurmagomedov gets brought up, they're out to dinner. They just got an injury. They're getting surgery. They got to get a haircut. Like something came up because Umar is a scary guy to fight right now for a lot of people. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Raoni Barcelos, 17-4, great record, more experienced on paper. Let's look at his UFC resume as well. 6-3 in the UFC, wins over Trevin Jones, lost via majority decision to Timur Valiev, and that was a close fight, but probably deserves to lose that. Khalid Taha, Said Nurmagomedov, a win that has aged well. Chris Gutierrez, Carlos Huchain. I don't know him. But overall, Kurt Hollabaugh. And then prior to that, even Dan Moret, Bobby Moffitt, he's beaten some pretty good guys regionally as well. Lost via rear naked choke to Mark Dickman back in 2014. So he hadn't been finished since 2014, got finished, against Umar in his last fight. Does that make him tentative? After his last finished loss, he knocked the guy out in the first round. So maybe Raoni Barcelos comes in here and gets after it. I actually think you are freaking spot on. I think you're right about every part of this. My guy says MJ jab is fraudulent. Looks like a damn shot put. Yeah, I just don't think he believes in his striking. And I think when he faces real resistance from a guy like Raoni who could box, unless Raoni gets knocked out, I think my guy's in for a very long night, if not getting finished. And I just think Raoni's better everywhere. I truly do. So good luck. However you're playing it. Liam doing the damn thing. Appreciate you, George. Got a lot of great people rocking with us live. Another friend of the show, Uncle Weezy. What's up, Liam? Hard to see Howney losing this fight. My man, I agree with you. The line is the only thing scaring me. If he was minus 250, I'd even feel safer. But, I'm going to wait and see how this shakes out. I think Howney's the side here, though. My guy Matt says he's feeling Miles Johns here. Has a lot of power, but I get it. Howney's the clear minute winner. I feel you, but I also think the power is just a touch overrated. I mean, he's got a lot of power, but he's not knocking out Kevin Natividad until the very third round, where he's grabbing the glove to get it done. He's knocking out Anderson Dos Santos again in the third round, getting it done late. Doesn't knock out Vince Morales, who's a tough guy. Doesn't knock out Cole Smith, who's a tough guy. Doesn't knock out Santiago. Doesn't knock out Yanez. Doesn't knock out Kyle Machado. Doesn't knock out Levi Moles. Does knock out David Miramontes. So he's a guy that he's got some knockouts. He certainly has some power, but I do think that Howney Barcelos, again, just the body of work, I don't think Miles Johns is on the same level as one of those guys. I wouldn't put Miles Johns on the level of Umar, on the level of Victor Henry, or on the level of Timur. But styles make fights, and I think that Victor could win more fights at a high level, but I think that Miles might actually beat Victor just because of the style. That's the funny thing about fighting, man. Apologies to my guy Daz. He lost 4 units on Fugit. He said after that kick to the liver, I believe he was kind of done. Yeah, man, I tend to agree with that. I don't think you're wrong there, but also, we've seen it against Shimon Smotrisky, who I believe is a jiu-jitsu fighter first. And that was literally before the fight had ever gotten started. There was no strikes exchanged. He just submitted him instantly with a guillotine. So Mike Malott, good guillotine by and large. But yeah, I agree. Best way to guillotine somebody is to hurt them to the point where they don't try and defend it. Next up, we got Jimmy the Brick Flick against Alessandro Costa. Alessandro Costa, pretty sizable favorite here against a very dangerous submission grappler in Jimmy the Brick Flick. Let's see if Alessandro Costa has ever been submitted. No, he's been knocked out a couple times, but he's never been subbed. One loss by split decision as well. Doesn't seem like he's blown many people out of the water. Got a win by split decision on Contender Series. Didn't get the contract. So Costa seems like a little bit of a work in progress, but also seems like a guy who's probably got the physicality to make it hard for Jimmy Flick. And he's also listed as a jiu-jitsu fighter. I would assume he's a black belt. I'm trying to check that out on Instagram right now. Yeah, he's definitely a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. So yeah, it's probably a really tough fight for Jimmy Flick, to tell you the truth. If you're fighting to the third round with Amir Albazi, yeah, you're probably, pretty decent. Pretty decent. I think he even made Albazi compete there in the first round. So I think this is probably, a Costa fight, but do I want to lay it with a guy who's only 27 and, who's at a size disadvantage here against a motivated Jimmy Flick coming off a loss? He's a really dangerous jiu-jitsu fighter, man. But I'm going to watch Costa's tape because, to tell you the truth, I just don't know a ton about the guy, especially pre-UFC. I feel like he's a guy that I don't really remember from the Contender Series. I feel like part of his problem has been he's been a little underwhelming. But Jimmy Flick is a walking highlight reel, but he also – he kind of wins or loses in fiery fashion. And he's done the R word before, the retirement deal. So a couple of things to be nervous about on that side as well. Charles Johnson put an absolute audit on him in his last fight. And, maybe didn't seem like he was fully prepared cardio-wise. And that's certainly something that you always want to bet against more often than not. ABCs, they always bet on cardio. Wow. Matt R, great shout. I almost don't even want to put that on screen. That's such a good shout. But yeah, we'll put that on screen. Costa sub plus 900. I mean, that sounds quite wide. But we did see Jimmy Flick kind of just cover up to punches most of his career. I think that's probably the most likely outcome here. If he's to lose this fight, I think Costa would probably get the TKO. But yeah, man, I don't hate the plus 900 shout. I think the ITD might be interesting as a way to buy down this price because Jimmy Flick's a very kill or be killed fighter. And our guy Zach agrees, thinks Flick's getting finished. So shout out to the chat, man. A lot of great input. Appreciate what you guys have to say as well. Just to list off the intangibles before we move to the next fight, Jimmy Flick is 5 years older, but he is going to be sporting a 3-inch height and reach advantage, and he does like those flying triangles, those crazy submissions. So I think you basically got to bet Jimmy Flick in the first 2.5 minutes, or you've got to not bet Jimmy Flick at all. He just hasn't really showed the cardio to go in these recent fights. So I think that's something to pay attention to. And yeah, I think me and Zach are kind of on the same wave here. Costa by KO or TKO, depending on what that prop opens up, will probably be something I look at, just because I feel like he's probably going to have that ability. The Cuban assassin does point out a very important intangible. Flick has a 9-inch mullet advantage, so we've got to add that to the capping formula here and see what it spits out. But we can move along here to the next fight, guys. We've got plenty of flyweight action to talk about, so don't worry. We'll be back in the flyweight division. But for now, we're kicking it to the 135-pound men's division, bantamweight. Kang taking on Christian Quinonez. And again, in terms of due diligence, these are two guys I got to do a little bit more due diligence on. As far as Kang goes, not a great fighter. He's kind of had a little bit of soft matchmaking at times in the UFC, but he has put together a really solid 7-3 record. It's just that he's been favored to win most of these fights. Let me pull up again my document. 5-1 as a UFC favorite. So he's going to be the underdog in this matchup. He's only 2-2 as an underdog in a 4-fight sample, so not a lot of opportunities. But the times that he lost as a dog were against Ricardo Ramos by split decision as a plus 240 dog. That was all the way back in 2018. And wow. Haniyaya. Yeah, that was a fight where he closed like plus 100 on some books, minus 120 on others, and he lost that one. But he's also come through as an underdog before as well. He came through as a dog against who was it? Man, it must have been, I think Bakary was a pick'em fight, but he came through as a dog all the way back against Michinori Tanaka by split decision back in 2014. Wow. So this guy's just been around for a really long time, but Kang has not fought the best brand of competition. I think his best win in recent years is definitely that Dana Bakary win by unanimous decision at UFC 275. But it's been a year since he's been in the octagon. Christian Quinonez, on the other hand, let's see when he was last active. Last September. So basically 9 months out of the cage. And he got a first-round knockout over Khalid Taha after, decisioning Long Zhao on the Contender Series. And he had a few decisions prior to that on the regional scene. But he has shown losses via stoppage 3 times in his career. So all of his career losses coming inside the distance. And in this fight, let's see. Quinonez, let's see what the intangibles are for height and reach here. So he's going to be coming in at a 1-inch height disadvantage, a 3-inch reach disadvantage, but he is going to be 8 years younger in this spot, coming out of Entrim Gym. This seems to me like a fight where, either guy could win. And the reason I say that is because I think Quinonez is probably going to have some success on the feet here. Let's just pull up his share dog as well. The guy's got 10 wins by knockout and 18 professional wins. So he definitely has some power, definitely has the ability to score wins by knockout. But, I don't want to overrate that here because Kang, you can't really fault the durability too much. 1 loss by knockout shows on his record. Let's scroll on through. Yeah, all the way back in 2008. So this guy has not been finished via strike since 2008. It's absolutely absurd. But he is 35 at 135 pounds, and dreams can't last forever. He is 18-9 overall. He has dropped a couple decisions. So I think that his striking did look improved in his last fight. He's a guy that's shown some growth and improvement over time. Certainly can't, withhold him of that. But he's basically a 500 fighter if it goes to the cards. 5-6 in fights that go to decision. So last fight he looked good, but dropped a decision against Hani Yaya, another age contemporary there. So now he's fighting a much younger fighter here. Let's look at Penguin Liu. He was 26, but I've never even heard of the gentleman, with all due respect. I don't think he's a very good fighter. Brandon Davis, a guy who's really struggled at the UFC level, and he's also in his 30s. Well, he was 29 at the time, but now he's in his 30s for sure. And they had the no contest split against Alex Caceres back in the day. I mean, the guy is a absolute, grinder. He's been around a long time, but the level of matchmaking has been incredibly soft for a guy who's been around this long. And I think that Quinonez, is a guy that the UFC circling as let's see what we got here. 9 months of development for a guy who's coming out of Entrim Gym, a gym that's been streaking a little bit, having some success at times. And, Mexico's been on a little bit of a surge, but who knows after that Aldana, laying an egg. I think that, maybe that's something to temper our enthusiasm just a little bit, but we'll see how this performs. I'm going to have to find out exactly what I think of Quinonez on review, but overall, I can't rate the Khalid Taha win too much. And let's look at the odds here. Best available. Kang is a plus 150 underdog here. Quinonez coming back a minus 165. I mean, as gross as it feels, I'd probably be more tempted on the underdog there in Kang, but I'm going to wait and see. I want to see what the physicality looks like as well, because physicality could play a huge role in MMA. So that's just something I'm thinking about here. Next up, guys, let's take a look at the next fight on the bill. Take a sip from the odds mob. All right. Next up, Carlos Hernandez and Denise Bondar. I like to take, I'll take my L's, right? I bet on Irene Aldana, and she took an absolute egg in the octagon. I never had on my bingo card she wasn't going to attempt offense. I just didn't have that in my expectations, but I will take credit for the wins and the losses, right? That was a bad bet. Good bet from the past, or a bet that worked out for me, let's say. Malcolm Gordon against Denise Bondar. Nobody wanted to bet Malcolm Gordon. I mean, he's just a guy that's got a chin liability. He's a tough guy to bet on, and I bet him there at over 2-1. The line moved against me, kept going out, and I didn't add to it. I was like, oh, God, did I take a bad side? And I think that overall, this is a fight where, Denise Bondar, the thing that I asked when he was fighting Malcolm Gordon that ultimately made me bet Malcolm Gordon, and again, it ended via arm injury. I don't want to read too much into it, but I thought Malcolm was having some success. I didn't think he looked like he was outclassed there. I didn't think he looked like he was getting blown out of the water. But when I think about the fact that Denise Bondar was fighting at Road to WWFC, Asset FC, WWFC, Road to WFC, Professional Fight Union, WWFC, Road to WWFC, Professional Fight Union. And he had 3 losses as well in WLF Epic, Professional Fight Union, and Professional Fight Union. Granted, he was fighting guys that had much more experience, 23-9 when he was 6-2, 10-5 when he was 6-1, 12-6 when he was 0-0, or that's in fact impossible because it says 0-0 and then 0-0 again. So I'm guessing he was 1-0. But I think that, Bondar has kind of just had this weird career where he's fought mostly on his regional scene in Ukraine and, nearby areas and things like that. I think WLF is outside of Ukraine. Let me just double check that. Yeah, he went to China to fight in WLF. So he has traveled out of country. He's done some things, but he's a guy that I was just a little bit unsure of. And now he's coming back off an arm injury. He's going to be 30 years of age here. And let's see when he was last active in the UFC. So it was last February. So he's been out, probably about 16 months. And I want to see if there's anything about his recovery on his IG or anything like that. I'm kind of doing a quick stalk with you guys here, but this is yeah, I'm not seeing anything about the injury. So really, I want to hear a little bit from him. Probably going to have to get translated interviews, but I kind of want to know where his head's at. I want to know if his arm's okay. Fighters are often really forthcoming about things like, yeah, my arm doesn't work anymore. Or like, yeah, I feel a lot of numbness on my right side, but I think I should be able to fight. Like they'll just say the craziest stuff. So kind of want to see what he says. I want to see how he's feeling because he was a guy that was on a really long win streak, was feeling good, was feeling, like a quick finisher and all this stuff. And then he ends up getting finished pretty quick. Carlos Hernandez, on the other hand, let's look back through his record. Only one finish loss, and it was via sub in round 1 against Alan Nascimento. Very dangerous grappler, high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu, really good camp, good physical attributes, strong guy. So I think that that loss I can forgive a little bit, but he's just not really distinguished himself against any UFC level opponent. What do I mean by that, guys? He fought Victor Altamirano, a guy who just got completely audited by Tim Elliott. Split decision, lost to Victor Altamirano in a very close fight. Or excuse me, split decision win over Victor Altamirano. I thought he probably should have lost. Daniel Barres on the Contender Series, another really close one. I bet on Victor there. I didn't. Or excuse me, not Victor. I bet on Carlos there. I didn't even know that Carlos deserved the nod against Daniel Barres. It was a very close fight. So 2 split decision wins. He ekes them out. Could have went either way, and then he gets instantly finished by Alan Nascimento, a high level guy. So I think both these guys, you know, are probably around the same. They're around the same age. I do like Valley Flow Striking Academy, broadly speaking, but Carlos Hernandez hasn't showed the same finishing upside necessarily as some of his teammates and his counterparts. He's also going to be at a 2-inch reach disadvantage here. Should have a 2-inch height advantage according to Tapology. And, they're very similar in age, a little bit older, 1 year older for Bondar, but I feel like this is an honest fight. And the line kind of reflects that. It's a pretty closely lined fight. I would lean ever so slightly. I would make this fight minus 115, Hernandez minus 105 Bondar, because for Hernandez, I don't know that he's got great finishing upside, but I feel like you have to slightly favor him because he's not coming off the injury, but he is coming off a potentially confident shaking first round submission loss. And I think that's something to be wary of. Shout out to our guy, says Liam. Oh, appreciate you, Quiz, but I'm not really trying to have drama or nothing, man. I wish everybody the best, brother. Take No Prisoner says, did you guys break down Petrosyan Duncan? My man, yes, we did. And what we'll do is at the end of this show, I will timestamp everything as soon as I can. I can't promise it'll be tonight because I'm going to get done with this very late, but if I can, I'll get it done tonight. If not, it'll be done by tomorrow, very early. And we'll make sure we have timestamps up there so you can go back and check it out specifically. But if not, you could just go on back to the beginning and we broke down every fight on the card, starting with the main event. So we'll keep it rolling from here. But shout out to Denise Bondar for making the comeback. Wish him well. Not trying to celebrate his injury or anything, but just again, standing against the market, standing against the masses, taking an unpopular side, and at plus 210, I feel like you could justify why Malcolm Gordon was the side there. He had UFC experience. He was a tough guy. He fought on the North American regional scene, which we know a little bit more about. Some of those fighters are a little bit more known to us, a little bit more available footage and things like that. So I just felt like we knew that Malcolm had some real grappling skills. I mean, look at the Makayev fight. Makayev's a skilled guy. He didn't just easily dispatch of Malcolm Gordon. He had to really work for it. So I feel like Malcolm Gordon just at plus 210 there was a little bit wide. Now Bondar goes from being the big favorite to a dog. Look at how fickle this MMA market is, huh? Right? How quickly the tides turn. So for a guy that's got 2 split decision wins and a first round submission loss in the UFC against besides Alan Nascimento, fairly middling level UFC guys, with all due respect, guys that haven't really taken that big step up yet and mostly eking by on close split decisions. Next up, we've got Felipe Buenas taking on Zhalgas Zumagulov. And these are two guys whose records on paper don't look so good, but, they're still fun action fighters and they can bring it at times. Zhalgas, he's been lulled into some boring fights in the UFC, but he's also been hard done, man. Let's look at the Zhalgas record. I felt like Zhalgas beat Charles Johnson. Thought that Zhalgas uh, probably beat Jeff Molina, and I thought that Zhalgas beat Raulian Paiva. That's my opinion. I thought that those were results that probably should have went his way. More often than not, I think they probably go his way. I think he lost very cleanly to Manel Cap and Amir Albazi. I think those guys are better than him. I think they're higher level, a little bit more athletic, a little bit more explosive, a little bit younger, a little bit more fundamentally sound, maybe. But he's shown some decent skills. Did get the finish over Jerome Rivera. I mean, that was a layup. The UFC was like, bro, we're sorry that we keep giving you all these hard fights. Then they gave him Nate Manez, who I didn't think was an easy fight by any means, but I did think that Nate, might struggle to cut the weight a little bit. Then Rafael Estevan botched weight cuts. So two guys botched their weight cuts trying to prepare for a date on May 5th. So this guy's trying to peak again a month later. It's the only thing that's a little bit scary for Zhalgas, but he's a pro, man. He's had over 20 professional fights, mostly at a really high level. He's been very hard done in the UFC. And this guy is coming in 13-6. He's a plus 130 underdog in Felipe Buenas. He's coming out of Pitbull Brothers. Pretty good gym. Pitbull Brothers, very solid. More names that outside in the Bellator organization, but this guy's breaking through. 1-3 in ACA, 2-1 in LFA, 1-0 in ACB. So, this guy's shown something, but got submitted by Jussier Formiga. I think that's fair play. No skin off your nose there. Lost a majority decision to a Russian in Russia on a 3-fight losing streak. Lost to Murad Magomedov and Mansour Katayev, both undefeated fighters at the time in ACA. So it doesn't look like this guy's lost to anybody bad, Excuse me. It looks like he's fought a lot of really tough fighters, and it looks like overall he's had great results. So Felipe is one of the guys that I got to do more due diligence on, to tell you the truth. But just looking at his resume on paper, it looks like a solid fighter, man. 3-0 to the knockout. Never been finished via knockout. 8-2 to the sub in his career. So again, pretty good record there. It's in decisions where he's fallen off, where he's fallen apart. Wow, guys, they're doing it. They're really trying to figure it out. They're like, can Zhalgas win a decision against a guy who's 2-4 in his career in decisions? So I like to hear what my guy Daz says. He says Felipe, a Muay Thai striker, mixes up the takedowns, shows a get-up game, looks like a scrappy fighter. Very interesting. We'll have to see how it goes. I mean, again, the judge's least favorite fighter, maybe ever, is Zhalgas Zumagulov. But this guy, Felipe Buenas, hasn't always got the benefit of the doubt. A lot of fights in Russia against Russians. I think that explains a lot of it. But also, he does have a loss on the Brazilian regional scene as well. So I think it's all fair play. I'm going to have to watch a little bit more of his footage. He is going to have a big size advantage here. 3 inches of height, 3 inches of reach, 1 year younger, 4 or 5 inches of reach, it looks like. Wow. So, yeah, pretty substantial size advantage. I want to see how these two guys size up. But Zhalgas Zumagulov in the UFC is 1-1 as a favorite. So, he has not been making you money as a favorite. But we'll see how it goes. Nice. Interesting. Uncle Weezy says Felipe is a solid moment winner, has some knockdowns, and an opportunistic submission game. So, should be some fun tape to dig into. Seems like an active finisher for sure. Next up, let's see what we got to dig into, folks. Teresa Bleda, another flyweight fight, you say? Indeed. Taking on Gabriela Fernandez. And I mentioned again, if you guys don't already, please go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Liam Picks Fights. I appreciate that because I put a lot of work into some of this information I bring to Twitter. And one of the things here is, you have Teresa Bleda in this fight coming in as a big favorite. Her last fight, she came in as a dog against Natalia Silva, top prospect in the flyweight division, one of the top prospects right now. I think a lot of people have their eye on her. Then we're looking at Gabriela Fernandez on the other side, comes in, makes her UFC debut. And who does she get audited by? JJSP, Jasmine Jasudavicius, baby. We mentioned on the show last week, if you guys watched the panel show, how I thought that Jasmine Jasudavicius was the side. I like Miranda Maverick. I thought she was a great fighter. Didn't end up betting the fight myself, but I just thought there's no way I could lay minus 250 in a fight where it's probably going to the judges, and the judges in Canada are not going to give it to her. And on top of all that, Jasmine just got a lot of size. She's a big girl. She's hard to wrestle. I thought that was tricky. Here, this is an interesting one because I think Blade is going to have a lot to prove. I think she's a very competitive girl. I don't think she's going to sit well on that loss at all. I think she's going to come back very motivated here. But, Gabriela Fernandez, not a bad fighter. I don't think she's put together the same resume of wins, but she's shown that when she took steps up in competition, up until the Jasmine fight, she had done well. And we have seen a lot of girls struggle, a lot of fighters overall, men, women, everybody struggle in their UFC debut. How many times do we have to see it before we give people the benefit of the doubt? And I'm not going to write off a Gabriela Fernandez because she lost to a good fighter who's a little bit undervalued and who's a little bit older and maybe doesn't get the plaudits. Shout out to our guy George. JJ is now ranked number 15, so Canada is back in the rankings, baby. It's been some time. Mike Malott maybe too in the future, but fun stuff all around. I think that Teresa Bleda, 8 years younger in the spot, so going to have the youth on her side. She's 3 inches taller. She's got some length to her as well. So giving up 8 years in age, I think would be a little bit concerning here. I think that Blade is very strong. She's very physically strong. I think her wrestling, grappling could be interesting to mix in here. I think her striking is definitely a work in progress. I did, actually take a small flyer on the girl she fought on Contender Series to win by knockout at plus 1,600 because I had seen some signs of worry about her chin in the past. So let me see if this Fernandez girl has any knockout wins. Just two wins by knockout. And they were over 0-0 and 3-1. Yasmin Lucindo back in 2018. Oh my God, she beat the legend Yasmin Lucindo. Yeah, Yasmin Lucindo was not much of a fighter when she first started out, but boy, oh boy, is she a good fighter now. So fun stuff. But I think that this is a fight that Teresa Bleda, can win. But am I looking to lay minus 275? I mean, goodness gracious, no, I am not. Not at all. Also, the line's not really moving very much off this. So, yeah, I just think there's a good thing about being younger. But how? Yeah, exactly. I think this is a lot of good points being made in the chat. How does a 21-year-old respond to almost being decapitated? Fair point. Think that it's going to be hard to outmuscle Gabriela. Great point. So shout out to Daz and George. A couple good shots there. Uncle Weezy says he's taking a shot at the under 2.5 at plus 200 here. I don't mind that at all. Female violence getting a little counterintuitive. I love it. Small shot on Fernandez KO plus 1,400. Brother, you're in my head here, Weezy. I love where your head's at. Don't know what I'm going to do with this fight yet, but just, it's almost a point of diminishing returns when you're 8 years younger and you're 21 taking on a 29-year-old, that's a little tough. That could be a little tough sometimes in terms of physical, mental maturity, preparation, things like that. So also responding to adversity. Teresa Bleda, that was her first career loss. Gabriela Fernandez has bounced back from a career loss before, lost to Maria Silva via unanimous decision on June 9th, 2018, on my freaking birthday. This girl lost. And, since then, she's done a lot of good work. It gotten a lot of wins together, but she did lose to JJ in her last fight. She's taken 14 months out of the cage. So let's see what she turns in here. Let's see if she can improve on that original showing in the UFC. But I got to do more due diligence before I bet up a fight like this. And, I don't envision myself laying a minus 270 money line. I would be more inclined to take the under with Uncle Weezy. So shout out to Weezy. Really interesting fight here next at 135 pounds. And I just want to give a cheers to you guys and say, please, if you haven't already, drop a like on the video, get subscribed to the channel. Appreciate it. Another easy way to support, guys, if you get tired, if you want to drop out, whatever it is, go ahead and find me on podcast platforms. Just put this all together. Took me a while to do. A lot of people have been asking for audio versions of the show. If you can rate the show on podcast platforms, 5-star reviews, easy, free way to help, and I truly appreciate it. I just got put up on a lot of those platforms. It's an easy way to help more people find the show, and I would really appreciate your help. We've got Ronnie Lawrence taking on Daniel Argueta. Oh boy, Dan the Determined. If you're looking for the IG on this man, and I think he is really determined because, at 145 pounds, I wasn't super sold on the guy. He kind of got audited a little bit by Damon Jackson, the leech, a guy who's big, long, just really put a lot on him, right? And Nick Aguirre, that was a much more winnable fight for him. Went out there, got the job done, wrestled against a guy who knows jiu-jitsu, moved around him, got into a lot of advantageous positions. He didn't even have to throw a lot of volume to win that fight. Kind of just controlled it, kept it tight, kept it to the vest. And we saw Ronnie Lawrence take a beating, against Saiji Kubkakramanov. It was a really tough fight for him. It was an eye-opening experience, I'm sure. And he lost to Steve Garcia back in the day. Big guy, heavy-handed. A guy who maybe hasn't gotten all the respect he deserved, for myself included. I feel like he's really shown himself to be special over time. Not a world-class fighter by any means. He could still be knocked out, puts his chin on the line. He's been hurt. But just a guy who's got really weird power in his hands and an ability to compete all the way 135 to 155. So Steve Garcia, shout out to that guy. But, outside of that, this guy, Ronnie Lawrence, had been putting together a nice streak. Michael Ricketts got the win there. Garrett Arnfield, guy who's been around, got the win there. Jose Johnson, guy who's been around, got the win on Contender Series. So then he comes in, gets the UFC win against Vince Cachero, round 3 finish. Maybe underwhelming in terms of the fact it was round 3, but he got it done. He looked aces there, got a lot of takedowns and stuff, looked good. Manny Martinez, a lot more dicey. Wore some damage in that fight. Got hit, got hurt a little bit. Managed to gut out the win, get the unanimous decision there. Saiji Kubkakramanov audited this man in bad ways. Saiji Kub, to quote the legend Demetrius Johnson, looked pretty as a motherfucker after that fight. He did not look like he had a scratch here, there, or anywhere, right? He just looked like he had been out mowing the lawn or something. But this guy, Ronnie Lawrence, had mouse here, mouse there, swelling here, there, and everywhere. My guy was welted up. My guy got beat on in that fight. He's a tough cat because he stayed in there. He got out grappled. He was tired. He was getting beat up, and he didn't quit. So I think what we could say about Ronnie Lawrence is that he's not a quitter. He's a tough guy. He wants to fight. He wants to stay in there, but I think he can be hurt. I don't think he wears damage particularly well for the division. Dan Argueta, I had noted before about the guy that he had done a decent job landing some overhands, landing some left hooks, getting into the pocket against some of these guys. Against Tercios, let me go back because I have this fight taped out for Daniel Argueta. I got to do more tape on Dan, especially some of the more recent UFC stuff. But back in the day, guys, I taped every fight that was on the Ultimate Fighter for the season. 135 and whatever. It was Edson Barboza and Giga Chikadze, the fight night. And I wanted to know about the fighters, Brian Battle and these guys that were going to be competing in the final. So I just watched the whole show just for the fights, not any of the, banter and the nonsense. And I just watched all the fights and I taped them out. So Daniel Argueta against Ricky Tercios. He was 5-0 at the time. Tercios was 10-2. So Tercios had, way more experience than him. And this is at 135, age parity. He was 2 inches shorter, 2-inch reach disadvantage. Argueta's a southpaw. Tercios was fighting out of orthodox, but he switches stances. And then I had, body kick from Dan, left straight behind it, nearly a head kick, outside low kick. He's controlling center through 1 minute, faking, feinting, ready to blitz, taking long-range opportunities with leg kicks when presented. Tercios trying to layer leg kicks with the rest of his game. Argueta is getting hit by a complete series. Defense exploitable when he is not pursuing offense. So for me, what stood out about that Tercios fight was I wasn't in love with Dan's defense on the feet. He has good takedown offense. He's got good wrestling. I thought he won the first round because he had looked for a guillotine, used it to pull guard into the top mount. Again, when I'm talking about how you use the guillotine right, you don't always end up on bottom. You end up on top, threatening. What's the worst thing that happens? I'm on top in the mount. Okay, that's why, especially for MMA purposes, the best guillotines aren't ones that put you underneath and guard unless it's dead to rights, unless it's money, unless it's 100%, unless you're never going to miss it. Because if you miss it, you are now losing the round and you now need to get back up to your feet and you've created more work for yourself. You've obligated it. So I think that people really got to understand some of the meta here for the jiu-jitsu. And I think that for Argueta, he does understand some of that. However, some of the things that are concerning, Tercios turned up the volume on him. He was getting hurt with a little bit of shots early in the round, Tercios, and then Argueta appears to be melting now. This is directly from my notes. This is in round 2. Argueta appears to be melting now, looking to retreat and to wrestle. Little else. Tercios likes to do a pull lead hook counter. Tercios has a chin on him, eating tons of clean strikes thrown like baseballs. Nothing staggered him bad or appeared to rock him. So basically, Argueta was getting through his shots. He's landing. He just couldn't hurt Tercios. And when he couldn't hurt Tercios, he just was trying to wrestle. And he couldn't wrestle him either. He had a tough time. And, I felt like Tercios got the better of round 2. So I thought it was 1-1 heading into the third round on the Ultimate Fighter. This is a round you got to win for your career. Tercios is confident AF in my notes. I didn't write AF in my notes. Stung him hard with the first jab, defended a takedown, and secured a double leg of his own. Tercios on top in half guard, stuck in a not very good guillotine attempt. Dan looking for guillotines and Kimuras on bottom, resigned to the fact that he's not getting up. Tercios now in the full guard, keeping heavy pressure. Tercios in a backpack position on the body triangle. So basically, guys, Dan Argueta ended up giving up the fight. I felt like he didn't try to get that up that hard. Then he gave up the body triangle. That's why it's the MMA meta. Once you get it locked in, if you're a really high-level guy with long legs, it's very hard to get somebody off the body triangle at all. So I think that this is why this is a dangerous fight. My guy Zach had asked earlier what I thought the cardio dynamic was, and I really couldn't remember. But when I looked at the notes on Dan, I'm concerned about the cardio just a touch. I felt like last fight he was able to put it in cruise control, right? He was able to park it. The question for me is, how much energy does he have to expend to control Ronnie Lawrence in this fight? Because we have seen that, when he goes against the best level of guys, he can get exploited in the wrestling. Let's just bring up the stats from that last fight, man, because it's impossible to ignore. Saeed Yacoub landed 10 takedowns to Ronnie Lawrence's 1. It was only a 32 strike fight. 32 strikes. It was just a Saeed Yacoub wrestling clinic, dude. That's all it was. Ronnie Lawrence landed 6 takedowns on Manny Martinez, 8 takedowns on Vince Cachero, and 12 takedowns on Jose Johnson. With all due respect, how the hell are those guys good wrestlers? They're not. So they're just very average wrestlers. And he got turned every which way but loose. So there's always levels to the wrestling. And I'm curious to see who's a level ahead, because truthfully, I think that Dan Argueta is a better wrestler than Ronnie Lawrence. So that for me was what instantly made me think he's a live underdog. I think that when you look at the fact he's got a 2-inch reach advantage, they are basically at 1 inch of separation in height, virtual parity. Argueta's the younger fighter here by 2 years. So Ronnie Lawrence maybe puts the pressure on him. Maybe he can outwork him later into the fight, but I don't like how much damage Ronnie's been absorbing in recent fights. I think Dan does hit hard. Ricky Tercios, I mentioned, had a great chin on him, right? What does a great chin mean? It means you're eating a lot of clean shots right here on this and not going down. If Dan Argueta is hitting Ronnie Lawrence with a lot of clean shots on the chin after all the damage he's taken in his last 2 fights, I don't necessarily love that prospect. On top of that, I feel like Dan is going to come in with some confidence. Having got that big win, the opposite is true for Raoni. His confidence could be a little bit shaken here. So, two tough guys, two guys that know how to fight, two skilled fighters, two guys with 10 fights as a pro, and the guy with more wins, who's probably a little bit of a better wrestler and who's got some momentum on his side, is the dog. I find that interesting. So I will probably be looking at an underdog play or passing on that fight. Give you guys an early look. But I understand the Raoni love. I would potentially hedge it, with the round 3 or something if it makes sense. But I just I don't know. I just got to trust my gut a little bit. And I feel like Argueta, Dan the Determined, that's a guy that I like to bet on, a guy like that. A guy who's determined to win by any means necessary, shaved his head, deleted social media. I like that guy. Furio says, a bit late to the party, but I love Bleda and Barcelos this week. Yo, shout out to you, Furio, with that Urseg max bet I believe you had. Sharp. A bit late to the party. I love Bleda and Barcelos this week. Hope you feel the same, brother. A ton of spots to pick from this week. Yeah, man, I tend to avoid the big parlay legs, but I do think that, Barcelos is definitely one that I would lean towards this week. And I have to look into the other girl to be a little more confident, but I feel more confident fading Miles Johns than I do fading that other girl, just because I don't know as much about her. I think Daz makes a good point here. Raoni is meh. I bet the other guy. I think Raoni is a little bit more sizzle than substance right now, but I don't think he's a bad fighter. I just think it's a tough matchup. I think that the wrestling dynamic is going to be tough for him here because Dan commits to it and he's good at it. And that just was a real problem for him. When he's not the one having wrestling offensive success, it was a much different fight. Some unders on this card, def worth parlaying. Shout out Daz Dillinger. Furio says Argueta plus 3.5 point spread will be a play for me. Think Argueta can win a round at the very least on the feet. I favor Argueta. Shout out to the sharp commentary. I tend to agree with almost all those points, man. I think that Argueta hits hard, tricky fighter, throws his hands and his feet, gives you multiple things to think about, and he could take your ass down. It's a lot of things to like, I feel like, for a dog. But Ronnie Lawrence also is going to have a point to prove here. No doubt about it. So should be a fun scrap. Modestas Bukowskis and Zach Pauga are going to kick off the card at 205 pounds. They snuck a light heavyweight fight back into the mix and, technically speaking, have been profitable betting on light heavyweight, but inherently much more volatile division. We had Zach Pauga get absolutely flatlined and knocked out by Mohammed Usman. That was a cool one for the boys. Did call that win for Usman. But when you're looking at Pauga bouncing back against Jordan Wright, I don't really rate that, doesn't really mean very much to me, frankly. Modestas Bukowskis, on the other hand, comes back to the UFC, gets a win over Tyson Pedro. I feel like Tyson Pedro is definitely fraudulent, but I also think that win is better than a win over Jordan Wright by a country mile. So I think that, there's definitely some reasons to think that Modestas Bukowskis is a little bit suspect overall at the highest levels. But I like his story. I like his attitude. I like his effort. I think he's a hard worker. I like the redemption angle. The reason I was always a little bit skeptical about him is because of the John Redmond fight, which I did tape from a long time ago. And he got knocked out brutally in the first round there. But, he's bounced back considerably from that. Only suffered 2 knockout losses since then. One of them was via injury. As you guys, I'm sure, remember when he got his knee kicked out by Khalil Roundtree. That was absolutely disgusting. And also Jimmy Crute punching him out in the first round of their fight. But he lost a split to Lord Mihal Oleksiejczuk, who's a very big hitter. And a lot of people thought he probably deserved to win that fight. The Andreas Michailidis fight was a very strange fight. So he's just had weird luck in the UFC, but the Lee Chadwick win, the Chuck Campbell knockout win, those are fine. So I understand the Modestas side here. Pauga, for me, hasn't shown me very much. a little bit of an older prospect as well. Some of the sharper books are respecting the Pauga side, so I'm going to definitely investigate that a little bit. But I feel like the UFC, doesn't really rate Pauga. And, they've kind of given him a pretty soft resume through the UFC, as a result. Muhammad Usman, he's not Kamaru, right? He's certainly a work in progress. He's got, I think, 2 UFC wins under his belt now, but he's not setting the world on fire with a, unanimous decision win over Junior Tafa, right? I think that this is the kind of guy in Pauga who has some real natural skills and natural athleticism. But I think guys that really want to fight and want to be there, like Modestus, and really have a lot to fight for, probably going to give him a little bit of trouble. And I also think Modestus, his wrestling, his grappling, and all this stuff, it's not elite by any means, but he finds a way to stay in fights and storm back on people typically later on. And I just think that for Pauga, the way that he lost that Usman fight, for me, is just so concerning. Because I feel like he wasn't really committing and pulling the trigger enough. He was just leaving a lot of opportunities. And Modestus is a guy who sometimes to a fault will like try and pursue opportunities offensively. So I think that Modestus is going to land pretty cleanly on Pauga at various points in this fight and maybe even hurt him. So that basically wraps it up, guys. We've done 90 minutes here, just over that, talking about UFC Vegas 75. And what you guys can expect from me is that I'm going to timestamp this show. I'm going to put this out on podcast platforms as well. That's on Spotify, that's on iTunes, that's on Apple Podcasts. And if there's a place that you want it that it's not, make sure you get at me in the comment section below this video. I'll be happy to address that. If you guys have a favorite bet, if you guys have a question, a comment, a concern, anything that you want addressed by me, feedback for the show, guests you want to see in the future, anything like that, please drop that in the comment section below. If you have anything you want to talk about right now in the closing minutes of this show, go ahead and fire away in the live chat right now. Because we're going to be wrapping this up probably in the next 3 to 4 minutes here. But again, I just wanted to say a sincere thank you. We've had a lot of people showing love in the comments, showing love for the new format for the show, showing love for the new guests, showing love for the panel that we're returning to. So I appreciate everybody sticking with it. I appreciate everybody that's been rocking with the content for a long time. I appreciate everybody that just checked us out for the first time as well. We get new people that filter in. Want you guys to know you're always welcome to comment. You're always welcome to ask questions. We don't want people who are new at betting to feel like they can't be involved in the conversation. We believe in education here. Lifelong learners or lifelong earners, note takers or money makers. These are things that we live by on this show and on this platform. And that's what I've been doing for a long time, man. I've been taking notes on these fights for 4 or 5 years. I've been taking notes on my own wrestling matches for 10 years. So I have a pretty good eye for watching stuff, breaking it down, seeing what people are doing right and doing wrong, and trying to be pretty objective about it. So for me, especially when it comes to the grappling, the wrestling, things like that, I tend to have a little bit of a better eye, but I've tried to hone in on my striking. You guys can see here, we've got the Conor McGregor book by Jack Slack. It's got plenty of diagrams and images for simpletons like me to better understand striking. The Logic of Sports Betting, books about betting on fights, getting smarter with our approach, understanding how to think like a bookmaker, reading about the history of boxing, about greats in the sport, reading books from coaches, reading books about mindset, reading books about the history of the sport, reading books about sport specific, wrestling for a commitment to excellence by Ken Sherta. I've been personally beat up by Ken. Great wrestler, great coach, championship fighting and explosive punching and aggressive defense by Jack Dempsey. My point being here is, we believe in education on this show. There's a lot of content that I've done in the past, how to take better notes and improve your skills as a gambler, things like that. I want people to understand I started betting as a $5 bettor and believed that I could do it because I knew I was picking fights good. And I learned a lot of hard lessons along the way, right? Betting $5 is a good way to learn lessons. It's very, low cost, right? And for me, it was perfect. I learned a lot of lessons. And then by the time that I got an education, by the time I surrounded myself with smart people that understood the process, by the time I put my own process together, by the time I accumulated a lot of notes and a lot of information that I think is basically like, there's very few people that have notes like I do. So for me, those are the kind of things where everybody has different sets of skills, and how you can set yourself apart in the market is whatever you do well. So yeah, my guy Daz File says can't see Fightnomics. Bet you have that one. I don't know if I left it at a hotel on vacation. I've read the entire book. I have notes, annotations, everything, and I do not know where my copy is. So it's very possible it's stored away in a box somewhere as well. I have many books. The studio is not set up to show you guys around here, but eventually I will have a multi-shot where you have my whole bookshelf in the background. And I like books about sports. These are a fraction of my books about sports. I have more as well, but I love books about everything. So I have whole shelves of books over here as well. So any questions that you guys have about random, reading books, writing, things like that. I also like those topics. I did learn about journalism in school. And I also have, put in a lot of, over 250 original articles about MMA in my lifetime. So a lot of time, effort, and energy spent on this stuff. So everybody that interacts with it, guys, I truly appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you want more information from me, you can always find that in the information box below the description. It's got a lot of information in there, guys, where you can find additional plays, information, third-party track record, all that kind of stuff. If you're looking for the podcast link, you can find that below. I try and make it, as simple and laid out for people as I can. But again, anything that you guys need, go ahead and comment that below. I just want to say, one last time, I appreciate you all. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. Until next time, take care, everybody. Come back on Thursday, and we'll do it all over again.